New World player numbers are dropping, but I'm here to tell you I don't really think it's a big problem. Now, we do this sort of like monthly where we have a look at the previous month's New World player numbers and we talk about what's going to happen to them going forward. And before we do that, I just want to give a quick little shout out to my YouTube members. I do really appreciate you guys. If you want to support the channel, that's the best way to do so. So here we are, we're going to be looking at Steam charts and we're obviously going to be looking at New World. Now, this is the first thing that I want to show you. I've basically cut out here the launch because if you include the launch was so big that it pretty much like dwarfs everything else out, and I don't think that's necessarily a fair representation. So let's exclude the launch and we get it to approximately about a year, right? Not quite exactly, but near enough. And what I want to point out is look at the bumps that we had and then look at this like almost like a straight line down, right? It's like a 45-degree line, you might even argue. And I suspect several people, if not, there'll be people in these comments being like, dead game, bro, why are you even talking about it? But I think that this is completely normal. Let's face it, I actually think if we went back to the launch and losing like that many players was probably normal, right? Most MMOs lose about 90% of its audience in the first couple of months. It's not even that weird or crazy. What I do think was a little bit weird with New World is that I think the baseline should have maintained a little bit higher for longer, and I think the issues that New World had at launch definitely contributed to that baseline being lower than it should have been. And I actually think some of the bumps that we saw later on should have possibly have come earlier with new content. So for example, I think around May we had PvP arenas, and really there is no bump or anything like that. There was no bump in player numbers until about the end of July, August time, right? And that's when we had the Summer Medley Fair, which was really the start of getting people back interested. Then we had the Brimstone hype and that got people interested. Then we actually had Brimstone and that definitely got people interested. But look, you can sort of see here, there's only a small window where Brimstone was live before Fresh. And look, it actually sort of dipped even then in like less than a week, basically. Which makes sense, right? You've just had all that new content. That new content doesn't last forever. People play it and then they move on. They move away. What happened was we got Fresh, which basically in a way sort of like artificially bumped up the numbers. It's effectively like a soft launch without actually launching anything. But inevitably, a lot of the people who played Fresh, they probably weren't going to stick around anyway. They were maybe just giving it a second chance. So those numbers now, we're back to about where we were when Brimstone launched, right? It's actually probably going to go a little bit lower. Now on this graph here, we can just about see, and maybe you may not agree with me, but it is actually just about starting to curve straight, right? Obviously it wasn't going to go like that. We'd be dead in like a month, right? Obviously that's not going to happen. It is going to curve out. Now, I am going to go on a limb here and say before the spring update, we might get down to like about 40,000 again, maybe even like 30,000. But I don't think that's all that bad. For me, the key thing was that we actually started to see bumps and we started to see positivity with New World. The fact that people came back for Brimstone, the fact that people came back for the summer event, the fact that people came back for Fresh, for me, they were all positive signs. New World as a whole, people started to feel a little bit more positive about. We're now going to be on a content cycle. We'll get content, people will come back, people will then move away. That's better than adding content and nobody coming back and then the game dying. We're not going to be at that stage, it doesn't look like, and everybody's feeling a bit more optimistic about the game's future. However, let's talk about this. We know that Amazon have basically said they're going to do less patches but try and include more in those patches. We also know that the leaderboards, by the way, are going to get thrown in before spring, but ignoring the leaderboards, from this point on, you can expect 2 major patches, one in spring, one in summer. And when I look at the spring one, I do not see anything there that will bring players back to New World. We might get a little bump because of a new expedition, right? Gear set storage will be absolutely incredible, but that's going to be incredible for existing players, not necessarily going to bring people back, I don't think. A spring event could do. It really depends on what's in it. If they add something like creative like they did with the summer fair, then maybe. And the main story quest, that's good, but I'm not sure that's going to bring people to the game, right? That's more of a long-term thing where when people do come to the game, they get a better experience. For me, spring is not going to do much when it comes to the play numbers. However, summer, things are a little bit different. Quite a few things on that list I really like to see, and I think even like something like transmog and having a collectible system will bring people back. If you have a checklist of items that people can go and like tick off, people will love that. That's just the kind of thing that people enjoy. Maybe not you hardcore PvPers, and I think hardcore PvPers might be a little bit underwhelmed, and we've already spoke about that. But collectibles and transmog, yeah, that would be pretty impressive. Combine that with an actual PvE raid, sure, it's just going to be one boss, but that might bring people back to be like, oh, I have to give that a try, right? I have to give that a bash. Those two things, I think we'll actually start seeing like play numbers bounce back a little bit. We also know that Scott said at the end of the Q&A that they're planning a big content update at the end of 2023. Be that either a proper paid expansion or something like a new zone, we obviously don't know at this point. But my main point is, I think we're going to see probably a relatively steady decline up until summer 2023. The number before we get to 2023, I could easily see this game going back to like 25k, 20k. It might be a little bit more than that because of the positive feeling with the game. It's really hard for me to say, but I'm definitely expecting a quiet period of time with New World. And I don't see that as a problem. The key thing, as I mentioned earlier, is that when we do get new content, people will feel a little bit more positive about New World and people will come back. You're going to see it be very cyclical in nature. We're going to have hype moments, we're going to have lulls, then we're going to have hype moments and lulls again, and we're going to rinse and repeat. If you check something like Final Fantasy XIV, and even though its play numbers aren't all on Steam, I bet you will see like peaks and troughs because it's just natural. In fact, let's do it. Now, I'm not saying this is the total player base, by the way, because they have their own launcher, so it's probably not. In fact, we know it's not. But the key thing I want to point out here is, in the last 4 years, you could just look at these peaks and troughs, right? Up, down, all the time. You've got to presume that that's reflective as well of the people who aren't playing on Steam. You don't sort of have your big hype moment, which I'm guessing was probably an expansion, and then a couple of months later, like the player base is literally like 1/5 there, according to Steam, like 1/5 on Steam at least. You don't go, game's dead, because the next time it gets an expansion, oh, big boom. Next time it gets an expansion, big boom. I'm not saying these are expansions, they might be patches, but the next time they get content or interest in the game generally kicks up for whatever reason, they get the players back. New World will now be the same thing. What happens to a dead MMO is that when you get content, nobody comes back, nobody plays the game's dead. New World, I don't think is going to fall into that trap anytime soon. So yeah, play numbers are going to drop, but I don't think it's a problem. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Again, big shout out to my YouTube members. If you want to help me grow the channel, then becoming a YouTube member is truly the best way. What you should definitely do though is have a most beautiful day, like and subscribe. Goodbye.